Today we are tackling a story that is, well, it feels like a major collision.
A collision between huge corporate ambition
Hmm.
and, let's just say, cold, hard financial reality.
Exactly. We're talking about the Ford F-150 Lightning. For years, this wasn't just another vehicle launch, was it?
Oh, absolutely not. It was positioned as this massive American symbol.
Right. The electric version of the F-150, the most iconic, best-selling vehicle in North America pretty much forever.
And it was hailed everywhere as Ford's big inflection point. You know, the sign that the Blue Oval was finally getting serious about the EV future.
It felt like more than just a statement, though. It was a huge strategic bet, wasn't it?
Massive. Think about it. They took their golden goose, the standard F-150, the truck that basically prints money for them,
Right. Immense profits.
and they decided to electrify that first. That takes enormous capital, huge confidence, and frankly, a lot of reliance on market goodwill.
And now, the twist. The really shocking news hitting the headlines now is that Ford is reportedly considering, well, scrapping production of the Lightning altogether.
Mm.
Now, we need to be clear. The sources, there's a Wall Street Journal report, analyzed by Motor Trend, dated November 6th, 2025. They stress that no decision has been made, officially.
Right. It's the official line.
But I mean, the fact that this incredibly high visibility product, the one defining their EV reputation, is even on the chopping block, that tells you everything about the kind of pressure cooker Ford is in right now.
It really does.
Yeah.
And what's immediately striking, I think, is the trigger for this whole discussion.
Yeah.
It wasn't, a slow decline from soft sales or some big recall disaster.
Yeah.
The conversation seems to have kicked off because of something external, an operational glitch, a fire at a key supplier.
Which feels almost opportunistic, a trigger for a much bigger strategic conversation they needed to have anyway.
That's certainly how it looks. Yeah.
Okay, so let's really unpack this. Our mission for you today is to dive deep into this confluence of an immediate short-term problem, the supplier fire, and the really high-stakes long-term financial strategy you need to survive the EV transition. We need to understand the numbers, the data that would make Ford even think about abandoning the Lightning, especially when it means pivoting to a cheaper next-gen EV plan.
And we can't just take the headline at case value. This story isn't really about a factory glitch. Fundamentally, this is about financial viability.
Right.
The supplier fire just gave Ford's leadership the perfect sort of unavoidable pause button. A moment to weigh the real cost of continuing with this first-gen Lightning versus accelerating hard towards their future, hopefully more profitable plans.
Okay, let's start right there then. The immediate crisis. What actually forced Ford's hand? What caused the production to start right now at the Rouge Electric Vehicle Center in Dearborn?
So the initial problem, the trigger event, was this disruption in the supply chain. Specifically, a fire happened at a key aluminum supplier.
Aluminum. Okay, critical for any car today, but especially for EVs, right? Weight is everything.
Absolutely critical, particularly for a big vehicle like the Lightning. You need to minimize weight wherever possible to maximize your range and efficiency. So, losing that specific aluminum supply meant the Lightning assembly line just had to stop, idle.
And an idle assembly line costs money, no matter what you're building. But here's the detail from the source material that really jumps out. The operational contrast. It kind of throws the whole strategic calculation into sharp relief.
Ah, yes. This is where you see the cold, hard priorities of where capital and labor should go.
Lay it out for us.
Okay, so while the Lightning production line was sitting idle because of this fire, forcing this whole cancellation discussion at the top levels, at the exact same time, Ford was taking the opposite action on the internal combustion engine side of the business.
The exact opposite.
Yes. They aggressively doubled down on the products they know make money. Instead of, say, scrambling frantically to find alternative aluminum suppliers to get the EV line back up.
Which you'd think they'd do for their flagship EV.
You would think. But no. They chose instead to add a third shift to production for the standard gas-powered F-150 and the Super Duty trucks.
A third shift. Wow. So running around the clock, building gas trucks while the EV truck factory is dark.
Think about what adding a third shift means operationally. That's an immediate big commitment. More labor, probably overtime pay, more materials, more energy consumption, all dedicated to pumping out as many traditional gas trucks as possible.
So by investing heavily in that ICE shift while the EV line was paused,
they were sending a crystal clear signal, internally and externally, about where their profitability truly lies today. The moment they had a valid excuse to pause the EV line, they didn't just pause, they hit the accelerator on the profitable ICE line, likely using some of the now available labor.
That detail feels pretty damning, operationally speaking. And it leads us directly to the core financial reason this cancellation talk is even happening, the loss leader problem.
Yeah.
Despite being the big EV flagship, the sources describe the F-150 Lightning right now as a substantial loss leader compared to its gas-guzzling sibling.
And we need to understand what loss leader really signifies here. It's not just slightly less profitable. The traditional F-150, the gas one, is legendary for its profit margins. We're talking numbers often cited upwards of, what, $10,000, maybe $15,000 per truck?
Per truck?
Yeah. Thanks to decades of paying off the tooling, a super optimized supply chain, massive volume. It's the cash engine. It funds everything else Ford does, including, ironically, the EV development.
So when we say the Lightning is a loss leader in late 2025, what are the specific pressures causing those losses? It's got to be more than just the battery cost itself, right?
Oh, definitely. It's a whole mix of factors, really typical for these first-generation clean sheet EVs. First, yeah, you have the high cost of the specialized bits, the batteries, obviously, but also the power electronics, the complex thermal management system.
All new stuff.
All new, expensive stuff. But second, and this is crucial, is R&D amortization. Building the Lightning required a massive ground-up investment, new tooling, big modifications to the Rouge Center facility, all for what is, compared to the gas F-150, a relatively lower volume product right now.
So all that upfront money has to be spread across fewer trucks being sold.
Precisely. That huge capital investment has to be paid back, essentially, through each vehicle sold. So you've got brand new, expensive tooling for the EV versus tooling for the ICE truck that was probably paid off decades ago.
The gas F-150 is basically pure profit walking out the factory door while the Lightning is dragging this big suitcase full of startup costs behind it.
That's a good way to put it. And there's also complexity. The Lightning, this first go-around, often uses pretty complex structures. They had to figure out how to integrate that enormous battery pack safely while still making it perform like an F-150 people expect.
Which adds parts, adds time on the assembly line.
Exactly. More parts, more assembly steps, more potential for things to go wrong. So every time Ford builds and sells a Lightning right now, they're not just potentially losing margin compared to the gas truck. They're also using up valuable factory space and skilled labor.
Labor that could be building a high-margin gas truck, like the ones they just added a third shift for.
Bingo. That's the painful calculation.
So the supplier fire becomes this perfect, sort of non-controversial reason to pause. If the Lightning was churning out profits like the gas F-150, you have to assume Ford would be paying premiums to fly in aluminum from, I don't know, the moon if they had to, just to restart that line?
That's almost certainly the strategic calculus. Because they know the Lightning is a financial drain currently, the fire presented this invaluable, unexpected chance to just stop. To reassess the huge commitment needed to maybe re-engineer the supply chain or find new suppliers and weigh that cost against the, frankly, desperate need to pivot towards making some EV profitable. Maybe a different one.
It's a brutal kind of efficiency exercise, isn't it? Forcing them to look hard at every single product line. And this whole financial viability discussion, it really sets the stage for our next big topic, the wider strategic context under CEO Jim Farley. This potential Lightning cancellation, it doesn't sound like a panicked one-off move. It seems to fit a pattern.
Oh, absolutely. If the Lightning does get scrapped, it fits perfectly within the documented strategic playbook of Jim Farley's leadership. He's shown repeatedly a real willingness to prune programs, even high-visibility ones.
Regardless of the good press.
Regardless of positive press, if they don't hit the financial targets or if the market shifts and makes them strategically obsolete, he acts fast.
Okay, to really understand that pattern, let's look back at a specific example the sources mention. It happened pretty recently in 2024, and the speed of it really highlights this kind of rapid, market-driven decision-making.
You're talking about the cancellation of that planned three-row EV SUV.
Exactly. That was supposed to be a big deal, right? A family hauler EV?
It was. And that cancellation was incredibly telling, mainly because of what they chose to do instead. This SUV was designed to be high volume, aimed right at families, competing with things like Tesla's Model Y or other mainstream EVs coming online.
But they pulled the plug.
Pulled the plug. And the capital, the resources, the engineering teams that were earmarked for that project, they were specifically redirected into producing more hybrids.
Hybrids, which feels like a classic hedging strategy, a safer bet.
It signals that Ford's internal analysis, at that moment, determined that going all in on certain pure EV segments was just too volatile, maybe too expensive to engineer for profit right then, or the demand wasn't quite materializing as hoped. Hybrids offer a much cheaper path to meeting emissions rules.
And boosting fleet fuel economy.
Exactly. While still using a lot of existing cheaper engine components and manufacturing knowledge, it's a short-term revenue protection move.
Gives customers that little green tick box feeling without the massive risk and cost of a brand new EV platform that might still be bleeding money.
Precisely. It showed Ford prioritizing financial stability and immediate margin over perhaps chasing pure EV market share dominance at any cost. They blinked on that big SUV.
And if we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the results of this kind of aggressive streamlining under Farley, the entire Ford lineup looks, well, leaner, drastically leaner.
The numbers are quite stark, yeah. It shows a real commitment to running lean and mean. The source material points out that Ford's U.S. lineup has been cut down significantly. Right now, it consists of just 14 models.
14. For a giant like Ford, that sounds incredibly focused, surgically precise almost. What kind of vehicles make up those 14? What survived the cuts?
Well, the source says the remaining lineup is made up mostly of two-row SUVs and pickup trucks.
Okay, so basically playing to their traditional American strengths. Trucks and SUVs.
It's a ruthless distillation, really, focusing on Ford's core identity and the segments where they're historically dominant and where the profits are almost guaranteed. They're shedding complexity, getting rid of lower-margin cars, and potentially anything that's not a clear winner.
The implication of that laser focus is huge then. It really confirms that the money, the R&D investment, is only going into segments that are either already huge successes, like the gas F-150 or Bronco, or are expected to be immediately profitable. And the Lightning, despite all its visibility and importance as a symbol, it seems like it just became a victim of its own high cost and complexity. It just doesn't fit this new, leaner, meaner standard of corporate efficiency.
That's the heart of it. It's the critical difference between building a proof-of-concept vehicle, something that shows off your tech capability, versus building a high-volume product that's designed first for profitability.
The Lightning was the proof of concept. It showed Ford could build a compelling electric truck.
Right. But now the company urgently needs to solve the profitability part of the EV equation. So they might be sacrificing the EV they have today, the Lightning, because it's just too expensive, to free up resources to build the EV they desperately need for tomorrow.
Which brings us perfectly to that future. If the Lightning is potentially on its way out, what steps into those massive shoes? What's going to replace it at the Rouge Electric Vehicle Center? This is where we pivot to the really exciting part, maybe the financially necessary part of Ford's strategy, the Universal Electric Vehicle Platform, the UEV.
Right, the UEV platform. This is Ford's big answer to that profitability problem we've been talking about. The source material says Ford is actively pondering using this new architecture for a direct replacement for the Lightning, built right there at the Rouge Center.
CEO Farley announced this UEV platform back in August, didn't he? And he specifically positioned it as the go-to architecture for Ford's future volume EVs. So what's the fundamental difference? How is UEV radically different from what they did with the Lightning?
The primary strategic goal is completely different. The Lightning aimed for that flagship performance, high capability, towing, hauling, competing at a premium price point.
Top tier stuff.
Top tier. The UEV platform, its primary target is radical affordability, high volume, and simplicity.
And Ford even gave us a very specific, very bold financial target that just makes the whole strategy click into place. A $30,000 electric truck.
Bingo. That number is the real moment in all this. $30,000. That fundamentally shifts the game. It moves Ford out of battling luxury EVs or high-end Rivians and puts them squarely into the mass market, budget-conscious truck segment, competing directly with, cheap gas pickups.
Hitting that $30,000 price point for a brand new electric truck built from the ground up, that sounds like an immense engineering challenge, maybe the biggest one they face.
Oh, arguably, yes.
Yeah.
It's the difference between building like a show pony, the Lightning proved it could do that, and building a genuine workhorse that actually makes money for the company when sold in huge numbers.
So let's dive into how. How does Ford possibly achieve that kind of cost reduction? It can't just be squeezing suppliers harder. The sources talk about fundamental design philosophy changes.
Yeah, they're aiming to deliver that affordability through what the source calls engineering cleverness, and a pretty radical approach to design and manufacturing, maybe moving away from some traditional automotive thinking.
Cleverness. Okay, what does that translate to in practical terms?
Well, this cleverness seems to imply several specific, maybe even industry-leading techniques focused purely on cost reduction.
More than just standardizing battery modules, I assume. What does it mean for the actual structure, the bones of this UEV truck?
It likely means maximizing efficiency by subtracting things. The core idea seems to be a dramatic reduction in the number of parts,
Fewer parts.
which leads to less complexity in assembly and also helps reduce weight. For instance, experts are widely speculating that this means moving towards things like structural battery putting.
Where the battery case itself becomes part of the vehicle's load-bearing structure?
Exactly. If the battery casing is structural, you can potentially eliminate entire chunks of the traditional frame or body components that other EVs, maybe even the Lightning, needed. This directly tackles that complex, expensive architecture problem of the first-gen truck.
Fewer parts means simpler manufacturing? Makes sense.
Precisely. It also probably means moving towards very streamlined assembly methods, maybe using those large-scale casting techniques, sometimes called gigacastings, similar to what Tesla does, that can drastically cut down the number of pieces needed for big sections like the front or rear underbody.
Fewer parts means fewer suppliers to manage, fewer steps on the assembly line, faster throughput in the factory.
All leading to lower costs, yeah.
Okay, but what about the single most expensive component in any EV, the battery itself? To hit a $30,000 price tag, they surely can't be using the really high-end, energy-dense, nickel-manganese, cobalt, NMC batteries we see in longer-range or performance EVs.
That's almost certainly another key part of this cleverness equation. To hit that mass market price, a shift to cheaper battery cell chemistry seems unavoidable, like lithium iron phosphate, or LFP, batteries.
LFP, we hear more about those now. Cheaper.
Much cheaper to produce. They're also generally considered safer, and they can last for more charge cycles, which is great for durability. The trade-off is they are a bit heavier, denser for the same amount of energy, so you might get less ultimate range compared to NMC.
But for a $30,000 entry-level truck, maybe that slightly lower range is an acceptable trade-off for the huge cost saving.
That seems to be the bet Ford is making. Some people are even speculating further out, maybe looking at emerging chemistries like sodium-ion for even cheaper entry-level models down the line, though that's more future-gazing.
Okay, so if the Lightning was this complex premium machine using cutting-edge, expensive battery cells, the UEV platform sounds like it's designed to be simple, robust, built for high volume, using structural components and cheaper, more durable LFP cells. It's a fundamentally utilitarian approach to building an EV.
That seems to be exactly the philosophy. Utilitarian, affordable, scalable, and designed to be implemented fast. The sources confirm that these UEV platform vehicles, including that potential $30 K truck, would be built in the exact same place currently housing the Lightning, the Rouge Electric Vehicle Center in Dearborn.
That timing and location detail is so critical, isn't it? It basically turns that supplier fire, the thing that caused the current shutdown, turns it into an operational gift in a weird way.
How so?
Well, it gives them this unexpected downtime, this window of opportunity to potentially rip out all the complex, expensive tooling for the loss-making Lightning and replace it with the streamlined, high-volume tooling needed for the UEV platform, all without causing a major disruption elsewhere in Ford's operations.
It absolutely accelerates the transition.
Yeah.
You have the internal financial pressure from the Lightning bleeding cash meeting this external crisis of the supplier fire. The result looks like a calculated risk. Let's use this moment to speed up the arrival of the simpler, profitable architecture we desperately need.
They're basically betting that the long-term win of getting that $30,000 truck to market outweighs any short-term hit to their reputation for possibly scrapping the Lightning flagship.
That seems to be the bet. But it is still a high-stakes bet. They are deliberately moving away from chasing peak performance and capability and focusing almost entirely on affordability.
And the big question, the challenge for Ford, is can they deliver that $30,000 price point without sacrificing the core things truck buyers actually demand? Can a truck built on cleverness and radical simplicity still feel durable? Can it still tow and haul reasonably well, meet those basic F-150 expectations?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? That's the crucial strategic analysis. The original Lightning succeeded because it proved it could pretty much match a gas F-150's capability, but the cost to manufacture it was astronomical. This UEV platform seems to be consciously abandoning that high-performance ceiling. Instead, it's aiming squarely for the mass market floor. Ford seems to have decided that breaking down that cost barrier, getting to $30,000, is the single most important thing they can do to drive widespread EV adoption. And, maybe more importantly for them right now, achieve profitability in their EV division, Model E.
It totally shifts Ford's competitive landscape, too.
Yeah.
The $30K electric truck, they're not really trying to out-tech Rivian or steal sales from premium EV buyers anymore.
No, they're jumping into the trenches to compete on price and volume against things like the Toyota Tacoma, the Chevy Colorado, maybe even their own super efficient entry-level gas F-150s.
The Lightning was great for the press releases, the Super Bowl ads, generating that initial EV buzz. But this UEV platform, if they pull it off, is designed to be great for the balance sheet and great for competing head-to-head on the metric that sells the most trucks in America. Value, affordability. It's a really aggressive, financially driven pivot in their whole corporate direction.
Absolutely. A complete turnabout.
Wow, this has been a really fascinating deep dive. What looked like just an operational headache on the surface, a supplier fire, is actually revealing this highly calculated, incredibly aggressive strategic pivot, all driven by that relentless focus on profitability under CEO Farley.
Yeah, to quickly summarize that key tension for you, you had the immediate crisis, the fire, smashing head-on into the long-term financial reality that the F-150 Lightning, their flagship EV, was a loss leader.
Right.
And that collision seems to have forced Ford to hit the fast-forward button on their pivot to this UEV platform, which is just surgically focused on hitting that profitability goal,
Right.
primarily through that magic $30,000 price point.
You could argue the F-150 Lightning actually did its job, in a way. It proved electric trucks could be built. It proved consumers, or at least some consumers, would accept them. It was maybe the necessary, expensive first step.
I think that's fair. But the UEV platform, it's designed for a totally different mission. Its job is to prove that electric trucks can be built profitably and affordably at massive scale. That's the next big hurdle, maybe the harder hurdle, for the entire auto industry.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you, our listener, to really chew on based on everything we've pulled together today. When you look at the big picture, trying to get mass adoption of EVs in the U.S. market, which strategy, which approach is ultimately going to be more critical for making that happen? Is it the high-visibility flagship, the $80,000 electric truck that generates all the hype and sets a high bar for technology?
Or is it this streamlined, stripped-down, mass-market budget entry? That promised $30,000 truck that finally breaks down the price barrier for millions of average truck buyers.
Ford seems to have placed its bet.
They have. And the success or failure of that UEV platform, especially that $30K truck, it won't just define Ford's future in the EV space. It will likely have a huge impact on the speed and the whole direction of electrification for the mainstream American consumer. It really feels like a clear choice is being made. Prestige versus profit is now driving the EV evolution.
Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We'll be back next time with another rapid synthesis of the sources shaping our world.